To the second ever CC Student Podcast. The Mr. Gizmondi podcast should be out. We talked a lot about his Quiz Bowl achievements, what he thinks teachers should be in terms of teaching their students, and many other certain topics. But today we have a very good guest. We have Mr. George, a theology teacher. He is known for his deep faith and great relationship with God. So please welcome Mr. George.
Thanks, Mitchell.
All right, sorry. I know it took a second to get here.
No, it's great.
But I'm happy you're here.
Same.
So, as I ask all my guests, why did you decide to come on my podcast?
I was thrilled to be asked, just thrilled to be a part of anything I can here at Catholic Central, and awesome to find any way to, just speak to our community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So,
absolutely.
Let's just dive right into it. So, Mr. George, what has your experience been like teaching here at Catholic Central, and why did you become a theology teacher?
It's been incredible. This is my 13th year here at CC. Over those years, I've taught the same freshman class in the fall and the same freshman class in the spring with a couple of other of our classes mixed in. It's just been incredible, honestly, to step into a place where, for my first visit here, the day I interviewed, you could see the history and the tradition and our faith and our values just really plastered over every wall.
Yeah.
I knew just as soon as I walked in that there was something huge I was stepping into, and it's only become more and more over these past years.
Yeah,
and not just because of our building projects and our expansion, really just our life. I feel like has remained deep and
traditional.
Absolutely, and I think in a lot of ways that's just become more the case over these years.
Yeah, you see that less and less outside of the world. Like the world goes into chaos, but CC. Why I came to CC, I said this in the last podcast, I'm a transfer, so 2 years ago I transferred here. And one of the biggest reasons is faith and tradition, and CC seems to really uphold those values. So.
Yeah, there's a great G.K. Chesterton quote that tradition means giving a vote to the least respected of our ancestors, to the dead. It's the democracy of the dead, and to let tradition inform who we are today, not just for the sake of doing things the same way, but for taking the best of the past into the future.
Yeah,
really. I think that means everything. So before I was at Catholic Central, as a lot of the guys here know, I was originally in the seminary for a number of years, studying to be a priest, and thinking that was a likelihood, or at least a strong possibility. And we can sort of kind of get into the details of that as we talk.
Let's go ahead. So I don't mean to interrupt you.
Not at all.
But let's before that, I want to pin on that later, but let's talk about your upbringing as a child.
Yeah.
So what was your family life like? Like, did you have any siblings? Like, what was it like? Were you always have a relationship with God? Was it taught to you throughout life, or did you kind of find it later and say like, hey, maybe I want to become a priest, and then you went to the seminary? Or did your parents say like, hey, this is Christianity, we're Christians, and then you're like, oh, this is really deep in my faith, and then I want to become a priest? Yeah,
absolutely. I was born in Grosse Pointe, so on the far side of Detroit, and I have an older sister and brother, and then later on in my mom getting remarried, I have two younger stepbrothers as well.
Okay.
So growing up, I was raised in the Maronite rite of the Catholic Church.
Okay. Which, explain what that is, please.
Yeah, kind of like a lot of our guys here are Chaldean, which is one kind of branch under the big canopy of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, Chaldeans stay true to their faith.
Absolutely, yeah, and we
They've
have
helped me a lot with their faith.
Yeah, huge Chaldean community here. So not unlike the Chaldean rite, the Maronite rite is part of the Catholic Church. It's a pretty strongly influenced Lebanese community, and I'm a quarter Lebanese.
Nice.
And the liturgies are traditionally in Arabic, and it's, I think, the only mass in the world where the words of institution, where Jesus says, "This is my body, this is my blood," are in Aramaic, so that the actual words, not translated, but the precise words Jesus himself would have said the night of the Last Supper. So really rich tradition, and at least one element among all the others is typically in the Maronite rite. Like the Chaldean rite, I think you're typically baptized and confirmed on the same day as an infant.
Yeah, that's Chaldeans. My friend, James, he's a freshman.
Yeah.
And he was like, I was confirmed and baptized at the same time. And I've never heard that, because I was baptized at St. Joe's.
Okay.
In
Howell. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
And so I was just baptized there, and they didn't confirm me.
Absolutely, for sure. And for a lot of the guys now, it's freshman year or it's 8th grade year.
Yeah, when I said earlier, Chaldeans helped me with a lot of my faith. Surprisingly, I'm actually not a confirmed Catholic.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so I definitely, when I get out of high school, I definitely want to pursue that, really become a confirmed Catholic. But I really want, like, some people ask me, like, why don't you do it now? Like, CC as a path. I was like, well, with school and the business that I run, it's kind of busy, and I really want to have
Absolutely.
that time to focus on God.
Yeah,
And so I really take like my faith very seriously.
absolutely.
So, and that's
Yeah.
really one of the biggest reasons I brought you on here.
Yeah.
'Cause I know how
Yeah.
rich you are in religion, and there's honestly just the way you talk and the thoughts that you process is I think would be ultimately one of the greatest guests. So,
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah.
So for me growing up, although church was a part of our lives, I would say it wasn't really deeply ingrained in our family culture.
Really?
And I appreciate my family. I love my family.
Mhm.
I would say I definitely have recollections of being at church on Sundays and Sunday school.
Yeah.
I would say it didn't necessarily become a topic of conversation, at least for me, in a memorable way at home.
Yeah.
And my parents divorced when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And so as we then went through that and moved elsewhere, my mom and my brother and I moved to Saline, Michigan, just outside of Ann Arbor.
Okay.
And I know we went to the church there a couple of times, but by the time I was in late elementary or middle school, it really wasn't a part of our lives.
Yeah.
And so it really wasn't until later in high school, through some friends that I had made specifically on the cross country team, which I joined as a sophomore.
Oh, nice. No way.
The coach of the team also wore a couple of hats, and he was the youth minister at the local church there at St. Andrew in Saline. And so just through that invitation, I was able to get involved in the youth group there and began to attend mass again with a friend of mine, a good friend who he lives back here in the Detroit area now. He and his wife just had a son a few months ago. He's getting baptized on Saturday, and
Oh, that's amazing.
this friend was he and his parents would show up every Sunday morning and pick me up for church, and I'd go with them for a long
Nice.
time until I got my license. And so, it was really later on. Of course, I had those foundations, just
Yeah.
having been baptized, confirmed. But it wasn't until later, really through a lot of these friendships, that I ended up discovering the faith in a personal way.
Yeah. Do you think that like a lot of so my question is this. Actually, I want to make sure I say this right. Do you think that people who grow up with like a family teaching Christ, teaching traditional values, teaching Catholicism, teaching church history, to them have a better chance of pursuing Jesus later in their life? Or do you think it's people who had that a little bit, but more maybe it was a title to them and not really something they pursued or just something that they just wanted to look the part?
Yeah.
And do you think it's just more people find it later in life, like it comes to them, or Jesus comes to them?
No, I think I know I've heard it said this way. I think this is true, that there are as many paths to God as there are people in the world,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of everybody has their background, has their story. Everybody has their own successes and failures and makes their own mistakes. And
Yeah.
so I think there are so many people who, I think I've been surprised over the years, both encouraged and discouraged, people who have found their way to faith despite a lot of obstacles.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people who, for one reason or another, maybe were raised on a steady diet of Christianity and ended up not feeling like that was
Right.
who they were. And so I would say, and again, I think this is backed up both just by common sense and by the numbers. I think statistically,
Mm-hmm.
and interestingly, if your mother takes you to church on Sundays and it's
Yeah, I've heard
you
of
and
this
mom and your
statistic.
siblings, then there's a possibility, an increased possibility over the baseline that you would continue going to church.
Mhm.
But for one reason or another, if your dad is a part of that,
Mhm.
that there's just a much higher rate of
I think it's like 70%. I
It's-
think its
it's
mom is like
significant.
12, and then dad is like 70.
it's huge. And again, that's, you can't overstate
Yeah.
what a mother does and who a mother is. But there seems to be something about the dad and his involvement that
Yeah.
apparently, and the numbers don't lie, that has a huge impact.
Mhm.
So I know, I know that when there's that foundation, there are probably 10 different ways I'll come back to this.
Yeah.
I think often of just general health or medical health, that I think if you're raised in a home where exercise is valued and where there's some
Okay.
awareness of healthy eating and trying to figure out what that looks like, it seems like it makes sense that you would generally be more inclined to live a healthy lifestyle and value
Yeah.
exercise. And of course, there's going to be some people who rebellion
Yeah, eat
sets
chips
in,
all
and
day.
absolutely, yeah, and
Yeah.
you just you want to say no because your parents said yes. But I think not unlike that, if
Mhm.
there's this middle road where the faith is not,
Because faith is hard. Like that's more
yeah.
tangible. But like for me, I talk to a lot of people,
yeah,
and Chaldeans are like really the only people who like stay like true to their faith, and I truly believe that they'll like pursue it their whole lives. While like other people, like they're like, yeah, I was Catholic, I went to church all day, and then like later in their life, they're like, now I found Jesus. And so it's like
Yeah,
it's
I know that can
interesting to me
happen.
because like if I ever have a family, right, I would not want that to happen to them. I would want them to go to church, but actually live out the faith and not just have it be a title, and then for them to truly believe it throughout their whole life.
Absolutely. And I think there is this bell curve across a number of topics related to the faith, but I think the faith itself, where there's that kind of pastor's daughter kind of experience, where if the faith is seen just as, I guess, a shackle or as a limitation, or be a nice person and don't cuss or smoke cigarettes.
It doesn't seem
for a lot of people, and I think it's unsurprising that some people who feel like they're overshadowed by and repressed by how faith is discussed in their home. It's no surprise that a lot of those people wouldn't want to pursue it the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And then for a lot of people too, I think maybe even with the best of intentions, I think a lot of parents say, well, we don't want to force this on our child. And so we're going to offer this a lot of latitude. And I think a lot of guys kind of say like, well, I kind of wish I had a little bit more to go on, as opposed to just having to discover it for myself. And
it's hard to navigate.
Absolutely. And so I think I found, even though there are as many stories and paths towards God as there are people, I think there's this middle ground where the faith is lived at home.
Yeah.
Those values are not just a source of hypocrisy, but it really is just a fundamental part of our identity as a family. And again, like you said, I hope this is true for my family, for my wife, Rachel, and I. We have 4 children, Ben and Luke beautiful. And Theo, our daughter Lizzie, and now we have one on the way as well this spring. Yeah, thank you. I really hope that our children look back and see prayer and faith in their life now as just a rich source of meaning. It's part of who our family is. It's not forced on them on the one side. It's not a big mystery that's not really discussed on the other side, but it's this really hearty middle. And I find too, and maybe kind of what you said about Chaldeans, I think there's something beautiful that for many of the Chaldeans, I know that it's really richly a part of their cultural life, their family lives. It's it's ingrained. It's not just check in on Sunday, check out an hour later,
that's what
bring
I see
the bullets
with a lot
home.
Of people.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be like that. So being like I wasn't to like flip back in history. Like when I was going through some dark times in my life, I didn't really have Jesus. And so like I like grew up Catholic, but it was really just more like a title. And like we just would go to church every Sunday, which was great. Because honestly, it was like that was really the only time I felt like my family was like super close.
Yeah.
But then later in my life, I went through a little dark period. I just started reading my Bible.
Yeah.
And so and started praying to God. And so like I kind of came like more like Protestant. And like, so I kind of like the biblical teaching. And so like some of the stuff I still struggle with in the Catholic Church.
Absolutely.
Like church teachings. But ultimately why I chose Catholicism was because I like how you have to go to confession. You have to actually confess your sins to a priest. There's adoration, there's rosary, and then there's going to mass and taking the Eucharist. I just think there's more steps on how to succeed in religion is far better than just reading the Bible.
Yeah,
there's more steps to it. And so the people who are out there who are maybe like, it's just a title to me or it's whatever, like what would you say to them to like say like, here's how to deepen your faith?
Yeah, maybe we can get Alex to have a little ticker here for how many times I make an analogy, like this exact analogy. You know, we can put up to number 2. I think that for a lot of people, practically, if this is not their intention, just practically what happens is that they're essentially going it alone. And faith is something that it can be hard to discuss with friends. You don't want to feel like you're like a holy roller who's just policing everybody else's behaviors. And
I always say I'm not holy. Like, so I'll
say
it
absolutely
1,000 times on this. Like when I speak, I'm not holy. Like, don't listen to me, listen to God.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think really the richest advice I could give, like I might give if you're struggling with your health and you're trying to, lose some of the extra 100 pounds that somebody's carrying, that if you have relationships that helped you to back it up, if you have people in your life that are friendships that you can talk to about, let's go work out. Let's not go to Buffalo Wild Wings a second time this week. Let's make our food at home. The same thing. I would be nothing without the relationships I have that have helped to reinforce and inspire me in faith. Young, old, men, women, people that I see every day and inspire me. People here at Catholic Central, Mr. Hancock and Mr. Babbitts, Father Fulton, Mrs. Kanuna. There are so many people who absolutely, and I again feel challenged every day. And I think they would say the same about each other, that we all challenge each other and inspire each other every day. And then there are people that I see and talk to once every couple of weeks or months or every couple of years. But these relationships have been so essential to me. If I want to be healthy and I surround myself with people who either aren't convinced that being healthy matters or are actively doing things that are making them unhealthy.
Sticky, it's poison.
Of course,
it doesn't help the soul.
Yeah, and maybe 1 in 100
Yeah.
people could say like, well, no, I'm surrounded by people who are doing things the opposite of what I value, but I'm going to keep doing the things that I value.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I would say to choose friendships where there's loyalty and love and affection and brotherhood, but also where you can talk about the things that are most important.
Right.
Like you said, if you're going through a dark time, where you wouldn't say like, well, I'm not going to talk to these friends about that. They don't care.
Yeah.
Where you can talk about what's important. And again, maybe more than anything else, where faith can be a conversation, not putting on airs, not like Job's friends in the Old Testament who like to recite, stale cliche lines about, about who God is, but somebody who can really listen to you and friends. And again, I'm just speaking of my experience that
absolutely.
It's relationships that have helped to reinforce and re-inspire me every step along the way.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So being a theology teacher, how has I know you described it a little bit, but how's your faith like challenged you or even helped you more being a theology teacher? Because you're like now, I think teachers are one of the greatest things, but I also give them a lot of criticism too.
Sure.
And that's one of the biggest reasons I transferred, because a lot of the teachers at public schools just don't care. And like you see them for 8 hours a day, like so 1 hour a day for 5 times a week, that's 5 hours. And it's just like, they don't really care. They're doing the bare minimum, then like stuff like that. But like here at CC, a lot of the teachers care. They would like at the end, like Miss Kanuna, she had like fill out the school doc and like say like, what can I improve? Like to me, that was like, okay, she truly cares about like, what she's teaching. So as a theology teacher, how do you put the most effort in to make sure your students get the most out of it?
Yeah. I feel so fortunate, over the course of time in public school and private college and private school now here teaching at CC, to have so many colleagues across all those different areas that I really draw a lot of inspiration from and teaching strategy from. My high school coach and he's a teacher also at my public school. I hear myself saying things so many times that it's carbon copied. It's exactly how he would have said it and done it. And when I first started teaching, I had some friends who
when did you first start teaching?
It was the fall of 2013.
Okay.
So I had been in the seminary. I had been at St. Patrick's Parish where we met when you were in kindergarten or first grade, I think, maybe even a little bit younger than that. And then when I discerned and felt called that my vocation and future was family life. And
how old were you during that time?
I would have been about 25 years old, 24, 25.
And when you were in the priesthood, when did you enter the priesthood and when did you enter out?
Yeah, I was in the seminary for those years. I joined the seminary, though of course I never made it all the way to ordination as a priest. I joined the seminary as a 17-year-old.
Wow.
Just going on 18 as I started college.
So you were my age.
Correct, yeah. And felt really convicted to at least give that a shot and give God a chance if that was possibly my future. And there was a priest that I'll give credit to. My pastor growing up, Father Will Stevenson, incredible man and wonderful priest, very much a hero of mine. But another voice that entered in late in high school was a priest, Father James Conlon. Mm-hmm. He's the pastor of St. Francis in Ann Arbor now. So some of our guys who come from St. Francis, they know him. And he said in the course of a retreat I was on that he realized for himself, if God was calling him to be a priest, that there's nothing that would make him happier. Yeah. That really was not just something he would begrudgingly maybe labor through, and I guess it's the right thing to do. But he said then, and I think would probably still say, that when you find your vocation, it really is not just the right thing for you to do, but it's the happiest possible route through life.
Yeah.
And so ended up when I was a high school senior, as I was kind of getting ready to make college decisions, discerning and deciding towards this St. John Vianney Seminary, which is where all the local seminarians of the Diocese of Lansing of my local region went.
Yeah.
It's on the campus of a school, the University of St. Thomas up in Minnesota. And so there was my 4 college years there, with the seminary being integrated into campus. We went to college football games for St. Thomas. I ran track and cross country there, had classes, some of which were only seminarians studying to be priests.
Yeah.
Some of which were just with pre-law, pre-med majors.
Yeah,
absolutely. Really incredible experience. Got to study under the rector of the seminary, a priest who's a real hero of mine, Father Bill Bear, who passed away just a few years ago. And then I returned to Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit, which is a major seminary, a graduate level seminary, and studied there for 3 years.
So the timeline was 17 to 25?
Exactly. Yep.
Dang. So you learned all of that in what, like 6-7 years?
I don't know if I can't reply to that. Yes, somewhere in the range of 5 to 8 years, I'll say. And I, again, really the mentality all the way through, and this was really reinforced over and over, is that whether or not you became a priest, that this is really training in being a husband, being a father, as much as it would be if you became an ordained minister.
It takes a lot of work.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't trade those years for anything. Really, just incredibly grateful. And
how have you taken that experience to the classroom?
Yeah, I would say, and you maybe have heard this before in the classroom setting. A few popes ago, Pope John Paul II said the world doesn't really need more teachers. What it needs is witnesses.
Yeah.
And maybe to circle back to one of your original questions, again, I've had some great experiences in both public and private school as a student myself.
Yeah.
And I think the teachers who had the biggest impact on me, and then in turn the impact I'd like to at least offer as much as possible to my students, is this is not just a subject matter that I'm passing along, but really this is who I am. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's interesting, I'll almost forget to say, we'll talk about a topic, whether it's contentious or sort of mainstream in class, and sometimes guys, after I describe what the Bible says or what the church teaches, a lot of times guys will ask, like, well, what do you think about that, Mr. George? And it's like, oh gosh, I kind of guess I could say that, like, I believe all of this. Like, this is all who I am. Mm-hmm. And not because my mom told me to believe it.
Right.
And in fact, like I mentioned before, it really wasn't very much a part of our family consciousness growing up. And so really because I've thought about it, because I really believe it, because I really think it's the most coherent and logical game in town, because I feel like through my encounter with Christ and his church, this is really, this is true, which is, that's why I believe it.
So you grew up in Catholicism. Why Catholicism?
Yeah, I think probably not unlike...
There's a lot of denominations. Unfortunately, in the Christian faith, which I don't like, and I think it's the evil one, where you have a lot of separation.
Yeah.
And so there's Anabaptist, Mormon, like Protestant, Eastern Orthodox, and it's like, oh, this is right, no, this is right. And so it's like, oh, I don't like, if you're like new to the Christianity, you're like, dude, like I don't know what's right.
You guys can agree among yourselves. Yeah. How am I supposed to
exactly
this out?
That's house divided. So I guess why Catholicism, and for anybody who's out there looking like, I want to have a deeper relationship with God, and like why would I choose Catholicism?
Yeah. No, like you mentioned before, like we said about, I think not unlike the Chaldean rite, I think I grew up in the Catholic faith in part because it had such deep roots culturally that in my family, immigrating from Lebanon and the other side from Sicily, 3 generations back.
Wow.
I think it was deeply ingrained in the cultures there at the time. And so probably even after my generation, my parents' generation sort of didn't necessarily know the why of everything, it was still that the practice was there and that the cultural tropes were there. Yeah. And if you weren't at church on Sunday, there might have been a cultural or family expectation of like, well, that's what you do.
Yeah, right.
And even if you say like, well, do you understand why we do that? I think a lot of people would say,
no,
because we do that. It's who we are. And there's a lot to be said for that. You could do a lot worse than.
But that's kind of
really
like
building.
Sad because like to me, like it's like anything. I look at particularly faith. It's like anything. It's like either you're on a basketball team or you're not.
Sure.
Or you're the baseball or you're not on a baseball team. So
Absolutely.
It's like when I hear someone say they're Christian, like for me, I guess like action's the biggest. Like my mom would always say, like your word means nothing to me unless there's action behind
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess like what's one way people can like truly like live out their faith, and like Catholicism, like I really like Catholicism, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
Like you have to like confess your sins, like pray the rosary, like there's steps to it, I guess.
Absolutely.
Out of the other ones, like they just seemed like the Bible is the sole authority, and then
absolutely
like, stuff like that. It's a little bit hard for me.
And I say this as often as I can in class. I really have warm respect for so many people of different religions and different faiths. And when I've taught our ecumenism and interreligious dialogue class, that's a class for seniors, which really focuses on what do Catholics and people of the Jewish faith agree about? What do we disagree about? What do Catholics and Muslims agree about and disagree about?
Right.
And then to your point too, what do Catholics and Anabaptists and Mormons and Lutherans and Presbyterians, what do we agree and disagree? Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and it's a wonderful class. And so I really, there are a lot of times I look at the faithful Muslims I know and I say like, man, like you are so often taking prayer more seriously than 95% of Catholics. And there's something to be said there. And I look at so many of my friends of different denominations who are Lutheran or non-denominational, and really find enormous inspiration. So when I say what I'm about to say, it's definitely not really for me. I think any lack of admiration for people of every denomination and faith.
Yeah.
But kind of like what you said earlier, that we have so many things in our toolbox that are avenues toward God. And again, we can get Alex with the ticker for number 3. You know, if you have salads, that's great. You know, and you could do a lot worse than having salads. That's right. Yeah, maybe I should have had a bigger breakfast. That's great. Like, you could do a lot worse than having salads frequently. Yeah. But there's so many more tools in your toolbox if you want to be healthy. Right. And again, I think so many of our Protestant brothers and sisters love Scripture and know Scripture and know
they do know
what the Bible is so much better than us. And
they know the Bible better than me.
Absolutely. And not dissimilar, you know, to follow the analogy. We as Catholics, you know, can find inspiration from that and really kind of up our game. But to have confession as a place where I don't just sort of send my prayers into the sky, God, I'm sorry for what I've done.
It's humiliating.
Did you catch that? Am I okay now? Or it is, and it really is. It's very, I think,
it's hard for people. Even like some Catholics I talk to, they're like, oh, I don't confess my sins to a priest. I'm like, well, that's sad, because it's like, it's hard to, like, because the priests are like, we view them as holy, like saints. Like Catholics were called to be saints. Like, so when I look at priests, I think, okay, this guy's like living his faith better than I am. Yeah. So it's really like humiliating. It's really like, I always say,
in the best way.
Yeah, in the best way. Like, not like that you'll be shamed or whatever. No, and they're very comforting, but like, you shouldn't be proud of your sins.
No, absolutely. And I think there's something really that resonates psychologically and personally. That
it does say in the Bible, though, to confess your sins to one another.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of Protestants, of course, will look at the Bible and say, but it says nothing about going into a small, you know, a small room, and that the priest should be wearing a white collar and all black. And we would say what we see in the Bible are these seeds, like an acorn, that you would look at an acorn and say that has nothing to do with the oak tree that I see. Like, they're two different things. Yeah. But we see in the Bible these seeds of what became the sacraments, like confession and these seminal moments that developed and evolved into what we believe is how God works through the church today. Right. And that's the good news. And I really love, you know, again, in our classes, you can even get more technical about it. You know, even if the priest turns out to not be a very good giver of advice, or even if he himself struggles with patience and everybody knows it, that here you have a place where it's not really the priest I'm talking to. Mm-hmm. The priest is a proxy. He's an ambassador.
Because you would know
standing
most.
in.
The reason I want to ask you this question, because you were studying to be a priest.
Yeah.
And so, like, well, like, what tools did they give you for, like, when people, like, confess their sins or, like, whatever? I don't know if you can share.
No, of course, yeah. And I really, by the time I ended up discerning...
But how close were you? Like, were you, like, right at, like, you were right there?
Yeah, I would have been about a year away from being ordained a deacon. And then probably then about 2 years total then from being ordained a priest. Dang. Not to assume too much. That's the timeline as I understood it at the moment. Yeah. And maybe to put it this way, I think... in my life, I've had 2 moments where I felt real clarity from God, that I felt like, and I don't often speak this way about daily life, and I don't often feel inspired for something big and specific that I feel like is directly from God. And the 2 biggest moments of my life that I felt were clear in that way. Yeah. One was toward the seminary, to say, this is something I think that God wants me to do. And so I pursued it, and as much as I could, jumped in with both feet for those 7 years. Yeah. And then the other moment of clarity, and for me, unprompted,
was married?
Was the ultimate discernment towards, I think, what I'm called to with gratitude for these 7 years is marriage and family life. And of course, that culminated in my wife Rachel and I getting married. We'd known each other for years previous to that. So yeah, all that being said, and it might sound cliche, no, I think the fundamental attitude and virtue that seminary aims to teach more than anything is just that same sacrificial love that God has. Mm-hmm. And depending on if this comes out before I talk to the seniors at the GDK day we have in a couple of weeks, there's this Old Testament word in Hebrew, hesed, Hesed,
I think I heard
in
that.
English. Yeah. And a lot of times I have a beef with how it gets translated. A lot of times in English translations of the Bible, the word gets
steadfast.
It means God's absolute
love,
loyal, steadfast, heroic, sacrificial love. Yeah. And a lot of times it gets just translated as the word mercy. Like God has a lot of mercy, which makes it sound like God is going to let things slide. Like God doesn't, just don't worry about, about little things. When really the word is so much more than that. Mm-hmm. And that's the quality really that whether you give one kind of advice or another to somebody who comes into confession, whatever words you use to comfort somebody in a moment of grief, whatever strategy that a priest might use, not unlike a father of a family or a leader in any community, whatever words you try to use to inspire, that behind all of that, underneath all of that, has to be your absolute loyal love for God and for the people that God has entrusted to you. Mm-hmm. And again, at the end of the day, taking confession as an example, for the thousands, at least hundreds of times I've been to confession, it's very few of them I can remember specific advice I got. And to be honest, I wasn't there for advice. I was there because the priest on God's behalf can take the past and can make it not hold anymore.
So when someone goes to confession, like what should be their mindset going in? Should it be like, I just want to be confessed with my sins and then take the Eucharist? Or should it be like, let's say even addiction or something?
Yeah.
Like say whatever it is, many addictions out there. And like, should you be like, I'm hoping to like have some knowledge or ways to combat this addiction from going into confession? Because sometimes I'll talk to a priest and he'll be like, all right, Mitchell, for your, I think it's active contrition.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I want you to do this and do
and
that.
for your penance. Yeah, absolutely.
For your penance.
Yeah.
And so, which I really also like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, there's just more structure to me.
Yeah.
And so, when someone's going into the mindset, or maybe just for me, like, what do you think the best mindset is? Like, okay, I did something wrong, but how can I now fix it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think three things come to mind. I think we can get a different analogy ticker going. I think like in any relationship, or you think about your parents.
Yeah.
If you're doing well in school because you want to get your parents off your back.
Yeah.
And you're doing well in school because you're afraid of what your parents will do if you fail. You could do worse than that. That's not the worst thing in the world. It's not terrible to say I'm doing the right thing and I'm doing it mostly because I don't want somebody to get angry at me. That's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the best thing in the world. I'm going to practice because I don't want to get in trouble with coach. I'm showing up and doing my chores because I don't want to get yelled at. And I don't think that's a bad place to start if you go to confession. I think for a lot of people too, there's a psychological element of I've got to get this off my chest, And I think that's not the only thing going on. It's not the perfect motivation. Because if I storm out of the podcast studio and leave you hanging and I say terrible things about your family, it's not the perfect motivation. Like, I'm afraid I'll get in trouble if people find out what I said to Mitchell. Uh-huh. A better motivation would be, I hurt you and I did something that made you feel less than you are. And it's worthwhile for me to set things right because of that.
And have that aspect towards God.
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is it's not the worst thing in the world to say like, I got to get to confession.
Right.
And I want to get this off my chest because it's bothering me. That's great.
Okay.
I think a next better place to be, to let that evolve into, like it does maybe for your relationship to your parents or to others, is to say, I cannot begin to fathom God's love and affection for me. And I just ignored that and kind of did things my own way. Mm-hmm. And as much as we can hurt God,
right,
which is a mind-boggling proposal that a lot of people get hung up on, God is so big and God is so ancient and God could not possibly care about the things that I do. And really everything the Bible says is that God, who created everything, who's bigger than you can fathom, in some sense you can hurt him,
right,
by the things you choose. And so to say, not just like I want my wife to stop being upset with me, so I'll apologize, but to say I really hurt somebody I care about.
Yeah, how do I fix
it? And now that's my motivation. That's what's great about penance too. With penance, if you forgot to do your penance, we believe it's not that your sins aren't forgiven, but it's that you missed an opportunity to make things better.
Yeah. I know you talk deep, so I kind of like for the people who are out there, which is great, by the way.
Oh,
for the people out there, so their mindset. So like you're talking about like you go to practice just because you don't want your coach to be upset. That's great. So you look at it like confession.
Could be worse, right?
I'm going to confession just to receive the Eucharist. Like, it's a great reason to go, but I want to take it, like for me at least, a step deeper. Like when I go to confession, like I want to be able to at least be like, okay, I have this problem, but I want to be able to fix it.
Yeah, I lose my temper. I keep losing my temper, and I think that speaks to.
And do you think it's like part of like the priest will give you an act of contrition? You do that, and then do you kind of like would it be smart to like mimic those things in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think so, and that's where you get into what came to me as the third point, and what you mentioned too. A lot of us find that we keep going back to confession for the same things. And a lot of people, I think, for that reason are like, why even keep going? Like, it's just the same thing over and over. Then again, like we keep going to the gym and doing the same things because a lot of times it's the same things are good for you. And you keep eating at least some of the same foods because that repetition. Absolutely. Nobody says, I'm so sick of this drinking water thing. I'm just going to quit it. So I think that one of the great graces, whether it comes through some insight from the priest and some idea that he mentions or some question he asks, or whether it's just God's sometimes slow grace playing out, that we start to see the deeper patterns. Mm-hmm. And again, some of the language is not just these are my sins, but if I can put it this way, this is my sinfulness.
Yeah.
Or these are the ways that you use the word addiction. I think some of us probably would say that word can kind of describe our sins. Like, man, do I love attention?
Yeah.
Man, do I love it when I can feel important to people. And again, that's not itself, that's not an awful thing. Mm-hmm. But if that's what motivates you,
it's the motivator.
Yeah, and it runs deeper, and it's more difficult than just, I made a mistake yesterday. I miscalculated and forgot to tip the waitress, like, darn it. But then when you realize that, at least for some of those things, it runs deeper, and there are ways that I consistently take people for granted, or consistently don't express gratitude, or I consistently lose my temper, or, and this is easy for a teacher, period 3 did a bad job, and do you know who I took it out on? Period 4. That's not their fault. They don't deserve that. And all of us, I think, to some extent, will display some of our, our frustrations. And I think to realize that
somewhat natural.
Absolutely. So I think that through confession, to realize not just that I made some mistakes, got to try to make it right, but that I really need what only God can give. That the only reason that I exist right now is because God is concentrating on keeping me in existence from moment to moment.
Yeah.
And that if God stopped thinking about me right now, that I would just vanish.
Yeah.
And so I need him in a profound sense, in an existential sense, but also that I need him not just to wipe away that mistake I made last week, but that I need him to transform me. That I need what only God can give to rise above the patterns, the sinfulness, the unconscious ways that I choose selfishness over and over. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about confession. Not that it happens right away. You don't start the weight loss plan and instantly drop the weight.
You can't just you don't just because you go to the gym one time doesn't mean you're going to be
absolutely
strong.
Yeah, we're really getting our ticker going on the analogy.
Yeah.
It's
But all right, so let's move from it. You go to confession, which is great. Now you're free from your sins. You're absolved. Now, what way should people view Mass? Like, what's the best view? Should it just be trying to listen to because what I try to do is I try to listen to the priest. I try to say, okay, what is God saying through the priest? And
absolutely.
I say this just in my head. I say, okay, Holy Spirit, go through the priest.
Absolutely.
I want to hear something powerful. And a lot of times it does happen and sometimes it doesn't.
Absolutely.
But when people go with their view in Mass, instead of it just being a Sunday to Sunday thing or something they're just trying to tick off, what's the best view saying, what can I get the most out of it?
Yeah, I would, I absolutely. And like you said, I've had moments, homilies I've heard and moments at Mass that were powerful and moving and shot right through me that inspired me to live my faith.
Right.
And then I've had at least as many moments where Mass kind of flashes by and I've been thinking more about my tea time coming up after this, or
I've been thinking about food.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or for my young children, a lot of times I've spent a lot of time in the hallway walking with my kids, and I think that's in good order and that's fine. And
does your church have a car room?
It does, yeah, it does. And then also that kind of opens up our parish, Our Lady of Good Counsel in Plymouth, that kind of the church sort of opens up to at least a more open hallway area. That's typically where we spend our time. It's a lot of times just less taking a crying baby away, more just we got to move a little bit. And so what I would really say is, again, maybe this isn't as profound as a scriptural reference, but I think John Cougar Mellencamp would have something to say that, life goes on long after the thrill of living is gone.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to approach Mass like so many things that we can be passionate about, and to know that sometimes the feelings are there and sometimes the feelings aren't. And if we're only loyal to any relationship or any obligation as long as the feelings are there, then we're not going to be loyal to much of anything for very long.
But give more tangible things. Should they listen specifically for the priest, or should they in prayer, after you take communion, should you really take your really deep thoughts and give it to God on Sunday and say hey God, I know next week's coming up, bless me, whatever they're struggling with? Or should they just be we're here in Mass and sit quiet? It could be different for many people, but as in general,
I would say maybe Father Fulton will see this, maybe not. Don't tell him. I would say that Father Fulton's a great preacher, I think, by the way. I would say that over the years, I've heard just as many bad homilies as good homilies, or uninspiring homilies as insightful homilies.
Yeah.
And so for me, my expectation that the priest will say something riveting kind of drops to the bottom of my expectations. And if it happens, that's great. If not, I think for me, maybe tangibly, there are two big things that even if I've heard this particular passage of the Bible before, whatever is read at Mass, even if I already know the story, that we believe that when it's read and proclaimed at Mass, that there's some power to it,
Right.
that it just doesn't have in personal reading, which is powerful too. And it just doesn't have in terms of like, yeah, I know how this ends. The 10 lepers all walk away. The one of them comes back. But that there is some grace to it. There's something real and something powerful that because you're there and you're attentive and you're trying to dial in, even if you miss some parts of the homily later, or even if the priest mumbles or you don't really get a whole lot out of it, the fact that you were there and attentive to God's word being proclaimed publicly at Mass, that is something, whether you have strong feelings or not, that can settle into your soul and can be transformative.
So really just listen to the priest and like what he's saying and like really try to apply it to your life.
I would say even more than that, the readings themselves, the gospel and the letter of St. Paul and the Old Testament passage, to let that be the thing that really settles in your soul.
Yeah.
And if the priest has an explanation for it that gives some insight, like, oh, I didn't know that was the original Greek word there, and that's interesting to know. Or that's a really good story Father told that helps to illustrate what was going on. I would say that even most priests I know would say the homily is going to be the least important part of what God is doing here.
Really?
And what's really powerful is what God can do through his word. And again, that's one of the points where we really, I think, line up with non-denominational or Protestant brothers and sisters, that that it's really the power of Scripture that can compel, whether you feel an emotional resonance or not. That's the transformative part, that you can walk out of Mass with grace that you didn't have otherwise. And the same thing too, whether the priest mumbles or sings, or when we get to the Eucharist, that I think every priest I know would say, if you can only pay attention to one part of Mass, really internalize, be in an attitude of God giving you grace and how you're going to receive it, then forget the homily. Just don't even pay attention. If you can only choose one thing to really dial in when this meal is served, that we believe is so much more than just a symbol.
Absolutely.
And whether you feel emotional or not, that the ranking of Mass would be, as far as your attention, to really say, God, let this food you give be real food and grace for me, and really feed me to be the kind of man you call me to be. Let this word be food for me, that when I hear the gospel proclaimed, that I wouldn't just say, yeah, I know how this story ends, but that you would really experience, whether emotionally or not, just experience that God's grace is there. And then it's icing on the cake if Father's a good preacher. And man, have I heard some great homilies over the years that have inspired and stirred.
I've also heard some bad ones too. But
absolutely. But to know that's the least.
It comes with it.
Same thing with confession. I've gotten some great advice and I've gotten some great insights over the years, but really, and there's the great kind of almost like as a parable, this Father Bear I mentioned before, who was the rector of my seminary and college, said that when he was first a priest, he was at a parish in St. Paul, and there were two priests who would hear confessions there regularly. The one priest would ask questions and say, well, what were you thinking when you made that choice? Or what do you think would be a better way forward? And it'd be a conversation. And the other priest would only ever say, after confession, say 3 Hail Marys, be very sorry for your sins. And on the one side of the church lined up would be all female parishioners. On the other side would be all male parishioners. The guys, by and large, they didn't want advice. They just wanted, like, let's just get this over with. Let's make it cut and dried. And there's something to that. I think
men are like, just by and large, and I don't mean this to be rude to anyone, but females are more in tune with their emotions. Male
seems to be the case.
Logically. So like, to me, that doesn't make sense, because that it would seem to make more sense if the men wanted more advice.
Yeah.
Unless they don't care.
I think that by and large, what it ended up being was what confession at best is about is not therapy. It's not even that you necessarily have to talk that much through it, but that it's God's grace.
Okay.
And again, I love, as far as stories go, I think it was Saint Teresa of Avila, a Spanish saint, I think lived in the 1500s, was a nun, extraordinary woman by every measure. And she in her lives had visions of Jesus, real appearances of Jesus that were not just dreams, but really, as far as we can tell, Jesus actually appeared to her and spoke to her. And she went to go see a particular priest and spoke about this. And he said, like, I don't know if I believe that.
Right, that's hard to believe.
But how about this? Let's put it to the test. I just went to confession yesterday. So why don't you go ask Jesus, if he's really appearing to you at night, why don't you go ask him, what did I confess yesterday? What were my sins? And if Jesus himself can tell you that, then maybe I'll believe that he's appearing. And so St. Teresa says, fine. And she goes back and Jesus appears to her again that night. She asks him, come back again. And the priest says, so what did Jesus say? What sins? What were my sins?
Yeah.
And she said, Jesus said, I don't remember.
Oh, I think Mrs. Jones said this.
She might have talked about it. Yeah. And again, the idea is the confession is not,
he wiped it away.
I got some good advice, but this is dropped to the bottom of the ocean. This has, and of course there are consequences of our choices. You committed a crime. you're going to be prosecuted and go to prison. But as far as God is concerned, to confess really, truly means that God says to us about our past, how to remember.
Yeah.
I choose not to remember any of those things.
That's beautiful.
And so,
that's God's mercy right there.
It is. I really think that's a profound, that's mysterious. And I think that, again, for better or for worse, like the homily being the least important part of Mass, and most priests would say that themselves, the advice that you give hopefully is good. Hopefully it's not bad. Hopefully you have a warm experience in confession.
Yeah.
But the thing to really get there is God's grace and forgiveness, is God saying, because of your sorrow for the mistakes you made, I'm there. So God says, I don't remember.
Yeah.
And if the advice is good, that's great. And if the advice is non-existent, if it's just say 3 Hail Marys, be on your way, that's great too. As long as the action of God is the central thing. And I think that's what we say about all the sacraments, which is cool. And I know, the juniors learn about it in class, that it doesn't depend on whether the priest is a smart dude. It doesn't depend on whether the priest is particularly good at speaking. Here in Detroit, we have obviously the awesome example of Blessed Solanus Casey, who by all accounts was a man who was a saint in life and a saint in death, and people attribute healings and miracles to him. And when he was first ordained, he was ordained in a way that he wasn't allowed to preach. Oh, really? Publicly. They kind of thought like you're just kind of a clunker. You're not really not smart enough to go take it was a way of ordaining priests called, he was a priest simplex. And here was a guy who, and maybe back to your question about the seminary, maybe was ill prepared philosophically and theologically and would not have been a very good teacher. And by all accounts, he had a terrible singing voice and he was a bad violin player. But he was a guy, just
going in the negatives,
stacking it up. But again, here's a guy who, what he did figure out was that sacrificial love, that heroic loyalty that resembles something of God's love. And so he was a man who changed people's hearts and changed people's lives.
That's beautiful.
Because of who he was, not because of what things he could say. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very long way of coming around to, if you go to Mass and you don't like the music, and if you go to Mass and you say, Father has an accent and I don't know what he's saying, or he makes jokes, he tries, he's not very funny. The good news is that's the least important thing. And of course, to reach out to people, we would want leaders who are charismatic and warm. But the great thing about, I think, kind of what you said before, the great thing about being Catholic is that Mass is still Mass, and it's still God's word, powerfully, in a grace-filled way, proclaimed, and it's still the Eucharist, even if the priest, kind of fumbled the homily or not. Okay. And that's a powerful thing to tap into. Nice. So to really pray into that. One of my favorite things, I have a list of people in my life.
I'm gonna cut you off real quick.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Everything you just said was absolutely beautiful, but I kind of want to pivot.
Yeah, so please.
It's kind of like a 3-step process, because I truly think, for me at least, maybe it's more for myself, but like, you go to confession, great. Mass, you just said, you described it. Maybe it's not less of the Father speaking, more pray to the Eucharist, or maybe it's certain lines that you hear out, or whatever God is telling you that day. But now that you're out of the Mass and you're looking forward to the next week, like a lot of things, as we said earlier, people just check it off. They're like, for example, they're like, oh, big football game's happening, I'm just going to get through work and can't wait for that, whatever. And so some people might have that attitude, like, I'm just going to get through the week and then church and then reset. So, but more for people who are more deep in their faith or more trying to learn more out of it. Yeah. What steps can they take, even besides like the normal praying the rosary and going to adoration? What other steps can they take to deepen their faith? Yeah.
I think one of my college teachers, I remember saying, if you don't offer to God everything in your life, then it just doesn't get offered. In the sense of, I don't know what your...
Explain that.
Yeah, I don't know what your morning was like. I don't know exactly what you're doing after this. And we have this common time right now that we can both maybe pray in our hearts, like, hey, God, please be a part of this time that we're making a podcast. But because I don't have every experience you have, I have all my own unique experiences and moments and relationships I'm the only person who can offer everything that's mine to God. Okay. And I think that in the very first moment of the day, it's not a bad idea to roll out of bed on your knees and just to offer to God the day. Yeah. And even if every moment of the day after this, I just get caught up in busyness and I forget, just to say, whatever comes my way this day, and especially if I forget to come back to you, everything I have is yours. Please be a part of my marriage. Would be how I start my day. Please be a part of my children's days. Even if I forget to pray all day long, which is one of the dangers of being professionally religious, is I might talk about Jesus for 45 minutes for every class. for 7 hours of the day.
You are a theology teacher.
And absolutely. And it's easy to get to the end of that and be like, wow, I haven't.
God,
absolutely.
It goes so deep, because what's interesting to me, and like one of the biggest reasons I believe in God is that many people, like, I look through it, like, I kind of look through life like historically.
Yeah.
And so I was like wondering, like, is there a God? Is there not? And this is like when I described earlier, like, dark time of my life. I was like, okay, so there's mountains and valleys, like beautiful monuments, like Mount Everest, like that's crazy to think of. But then I thought inward in our body, and I looked at the human skeletal system. And I said, it is perfectly aligned. Our blood vessels, white blood cells, tissue. I was like, that's so crazy to me. And then I was watching Cliff. I forgot his name. He was like, life comes from life. He goes, there's no other possible. An intelligent human being had to create you. Yeah. And then I was thinking, okay, well, then who is that God? Yeah. Now, I have to be somewhat honest. I actually haven't looked at like the Quran a little bit or Hindu. So I haven't experienced that. So for other people who might be watching who believe in those gods, that's no shame to you. But I was always taught Jesus Christ. And so when I picked up my Bible and started reading it, it like really spoke out. And I read the full first book of Genesis and like creation and just like everything. It like really made sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it was really beautiful. And so like, I guess for me, like what I try to do, and I have a Matthew Kelly book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like Decision Point. Mm-hmm. It's really great. If you're out there, I recommend buying it. It's like journaling and reading the Bible. And like, I would try to do that and pray the rosary. And sometimes I get busy and stuff like that. But I guess like that's what I was asking for, like more tangible stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know go deep into it. But anything like that?
Yeah. So to start the day by offering things to God. Mm-hmm. I think to try in some way, whatever way, to return to prayer through the day. I think to have an attitude where you're interceding and praying for the people in your life is one of the things for me that is a concrete thing. I have just a piece of paper that I take with me to Mass, and I have with me at school every day that has a list of all the people in my life that I most care about. It includes my students, it includes my family, it includes friends. And I have found, maybe if we had time for only one thing, where you said, just give us one thing that's practical, to pray for the people in your life obviously you're asking God to give them grace, and we believe that God does that. Mm-hmm. But it also turns your heart and attention towards people, and not just tasks, which all of us have tasks and goals and chores and errands that we have to pay attention to, but to keep the focus of life on relationships. Yeah. And especially for us as men, that's difficult. And for a lot of us, it resonates more early on with the truth of Christianity or the mission of Christianity. It's not necessarily, if I say, having a personal relationship with Jesus. A lot of times for young women, that makes sense. Okay, right. I want a relationship. I want, I want strength in my relationships. And for guys, sometimes we're I think a little bit slower to fully realize the meaning and power of relationships. Yeah. And so in the midst of the mission and the truth and the intellectual work and the
that's what makes it interesting to me.
Absolutely.
God designed us like because of the fall, free will, right? Yeah. So you have the decision to believe in God or not to believe in God. Yeah. What you choose to believe, because everyone worships something, I believe.
Absolutely. I think by definition, everybody has a final end they're working towards, and maybe that's getting left alone by everybody, or maybe that's money, but I think everybody worships something. I think that's just how we're constituted, and what you worship then is the question, not if you worship something. Yeah. And some of us don't know. Some of us have no idea what it is that's at the top of our ladder of priorities. Yeah. But I would say really, if you don't have this, Mitchell or anybody listening to the podcast, to just sit down and to make a list. Maybe you start with mom and dad, even if they drive you crazy. Maybe all the more is a reason you should pray for them. Yeah. And brothers and sisters and friends, and to set aside at least a few minutes a day before everything else, after everything else, where you really intentionally pray. Maybe all you say is thank you for these people in my life. Right. And now it opens these doors of gratitude, and God's grace can work through that. And that's it grounds you and centers you. And I think that's, it doesn't sound like a task in the same way as like, well, what else is on the list of things to do? Yeah. But it really, it does lead, I think, to every other good thing in the world of faith. Yeah. C.S. Lewis said, when a man becomes a believer, he becomes an intellectual. And I think that for a lot of people, and this is one of my criticisms, in the theology department, we're always talking about how can we do a better job? How can we reach guys better? Yeah. And part of it is
what I want to get into.
Yeah. Well, Pope Benedict said, just again, this is a couple of popes back, that the church is doing an excellent job of answering questions that no one has. Yeah. And sometimes we get caught up in these technicalities, and we're teaching things where nobody's asking this question. We don't have to bother answering it right now. But when we really get to the core of who God is, and when people arrive at faith, then they're going to look into so many of the questions that are secondary and the next question up. So I feel like going to the heart of faith.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to cut
not at all. No,
I know you can talk on and on.
No, please.
But
my wife says that too.
Criticism, which is perfect. So sometimes I feel like in just anyone spiritually, like they you ask them a question and they're not able to answer it, but like they're still like trying to formulate an answer to give you a question or answer. That's obvious, right?
Yeah.
But like, is there ever an okay time for a priest or even a theology teacher, like where you ever ask a question by a student, and you're like, I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
And there's ever like, how do you like combat that, or how do you say like, I don't know the answer?
Yeah.
Because like when you go to the doctor's office, right? My doctor, he has a computer. And not all the doctors are going to know it. Like, you have to prescribe this amount of dose to that person. Like, sometimes they have to like look it up or research deeper. Is there like a point where like someone has asked you a question, you're like, I'm unable to answer that for you?
Yeah, I would say three things. To be honest, in the first case of like a technical answer to a question,
a
lot of times, most questions that come up in class, I have at least a general sense of the answer. Like, there's a lot of times where
you taught them. Like you're teaching it, so
Yeah, I would say so, and I would say maybe about that sometimes there's a question about like, well, wait, where does that happen in the Bible? And my answer has to be, I honestly don't remember. Like, I'll have to look it up, or somebody will ask a question like, wait, wasn't that this person's sister, or didn't Abraham say this? And sometimes the answer is, especially with the vast, length of the Bible, sometimes the answer is I don't know, but I'd be happy to look into that and find that out. I would say for a lot of the bigger philosophical questions, a lot of times I have a sense of, if I can't give you a citation specifically of what the church teaches, that the Catholic instinct and the Christian, like fundamentals, we can pretty quickly apply what the church would say about that. If you take some, what would the church say about aliens? That I don't necessarily have to say.
Like, Gismondi that.
Did you? Yeah, and that's great. Sounds like we're coming back to similar themes. Again, I don't know if I could quote
like, I don't
you.
know.
Yeah, but I can tell you like what the church would say.
An interesting conversation.
Yeah, and I can tell you, because we believe that God created everything and everyone, that if there are aliens out there, that God is also responsible for their existence. And
right.
So
but the Bible doesn't necessarily say that.
No, and I think that's one of the places where I think, and maybe the third thing that comes to mind, I think what guys appreciate, if it's not a technical question, but it's a big question, like, so if God's so great, and if God can do anything, then why is there suffering? Which a lot of times there's a question behind the question. It's not just this big global, but the question really is,
for me, for suffering, the way I understand it, and maybe you can correct me if I'm a bit wrong, but the way I understand suffering is that if you don't suffer, you're gonna be a lazy couch potato. Because
a lot of times,
because through suffering you can like do amazing things. Like when you're late behind a project, like you're working hard to make sure you get your deadline. Or if you don't get outside your comfort zone, you're just gonna be staying in there, and like nothing great will come out of it. Yeah. But from suffering,
musicians suffer, students suffer, athletes suffer.
But that's just like normal suffering.
Yeah.
But like, let's take it a step farther. Let's say someone lost like their dad or their mom in a car crash. Like to them, like I realize like that's like, and unfortunately, and maybe I don't say this right, but like to me, God's trying to like put something like greater in your life. Wow, because he works through sin, he works through suffering. Yeah. And so like, what would you say that to someone?
Yeah.
I don't know if I worded that correctly.
No, and maybe kind of the bridge between the two questions is where I do say I don't know.
Yeah.
Is with a big question like that, there's nothing I can say that's a simple syllogism that will just make suffering easier to deal with. And so I have to say, if you want to ask me either why is there suffering or why am I suffering? Why did my parents get a divorce? I don't have a cute one-liner that can make that easy. And to admit that and to say, it's not just when God closes a door, he opens a window. Next question.
Yeah.
I think it's important to say, and I think people might not remember what you said to them in a moment of difficulty or suffering,
right?
But they sure remember if you were there. And so I think it's important, even in the classroom setting, to accompany and to be with a student who's asking that question. It's not just this adversarial, like, well, there's an answer and you're just not you haven't arrived
like a math
at it.
Problem.
It's not. And to admit that that there are things that I don't know why your mom got sick, and
it's hard to answer. But do you think some of the suffering that is self-inflicted?
Absolutely.
So like, but like they like blame God. So like when I'm in prayer, what I try to do a lot of times, like I see like in the Bible, they're always like cursing God, like, God, why'd you do this to me? I actually try not to do that because I think God is very understanding, very merciful, and I think he gives you every opportunity to like get away from it or to learn from it or just to move on from it, and like you just choose the opposite way.
Yeah.
And so like when I like mess up, I say, God, like forgive me for not listening to you.
Yeah.
Or like,
No,
I'm
I
sorry,
think there's a
I
lot
wasn't
of that.
smart of that. So like I guess the self-inflicted wounds, like how can people avoid that? But like also people, I feel like they kind of conflict, like what's God suffering, like what's their own suffering.
Yeah. And I think if we can bracket, like you talked about, terrible tragedies, and maybe we can come back to that in a second about your grandma's cancer diagnosis or your grandfather's death and things like that. I think that there are a lot of kinds of suffering where it's fascinating throughout the Old Testament. It's probably the most honest document ever written.
Yeah.
Where the Hebrew people, their first instinct most times when something bad happens is, this is on us somehow. We weren't faithful the way we could have been or should have been. We didn't follow God's commandments.
Yeah.
That maybe it's not God punishing us, but that there's something for us to do here.
Right.
And that's not always the case. And there are people who get into that.
I think you have a little bit more control than people like to think.
I think so. And it can become pathological and fascinating. I think it's like a classic 15-year-old move that a lot of, let's say our freshmen being 15 years old, you blame yourself for things you couldn't possibly control.
Right.
But then you don't always take responsibility for the things you can. So some of our guys,
you got to take self-accountability.
Absolutely. And so some of our guys blame themselves for their parents' divorce, and it's got to be like, listen, that could never be on you.
Right.
But then you also didn't take the laundry up the 12 times you walked past on the stairs. And it's like, just take responsibility for what you can. And so I think there's this radical accountability in the Old Testament that you see, where there's this sense, kind of you could flip it around if you want to say, why doesn't God do something about the people on the streets of Detroit?
Yeah.
Before we get to that, I could say, why don't you do something about the people on the streets of Detroit? Like
it's
you
dangerous.
could, you could absolutely do
Right.
something probably more than you are. And again, we live in the shared reality where the world as we experience it has, the same podcast studio equipment that makes us comfortable right now can also be what Alex stubs his toe on later.
Yeah.
And so there are some things that are just suffering because this is what it looks like to live in a shared reality. I think for the biggest questions, and it's one of the reasons why I come back to the book of Job over and over, and Job spends most of the 40 chapters of the book, 42
Job
chapters.
Is crazy. That book is crazy.
Absolutely. He essentially puts God on trial, and he essentially puts to God like...
Wait, I thought God put him on trial.
At the end, he does. At the end, God flips it around on Job, not in a punishing way.
Hang on. Let's go through the book of Job. From my understanding. My understanding from the book of Job is that Job is this great person. He's like doing everything faithfully to God. Maybe not. Like obviously, sin
he maintains that he maintains his innocence.
Right. And then but then the evil one comes in. And he says, "Oh, Job only is appreciating you for everything because his life is so good.
Absolutely.
Let me destroy his life, essentially, like kill his family, give him hives, like do all these awful things, and he won't believe in you." And God puts Job to the test. I thought it was God putting Job on trial, not Job putting God on trial.
Job is undergoing trial of his own, absolutely, and he loses everything.
Yeah.
But then he spends a lot of the book saying essentially things that are not entirely true. He says, God is not being fair with me. God is not dealing with me justly.
Okay.
And interestingly, then his friends come into the picture, and they start saying things that are technically true, like, well, technically, Job, God would never allow something unjust to happen and something unfair to happen. And at the end of the book, God appears to Job in a way that maybe you can only describe as he has a personal encounter with the mystery of who God is, that God shares with Job.
Like kind of like the burning bush?
Absolutely. Something that is, I think, tantamount to that God takes Job on this cosmic tour, and Job, through this experience, sees something of the universe as God sees it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the book, Job, through this experience, and I think you could say, and maybe to come all the way back, through love, which is who God is. That's what it is to know God, that it's to come in contact with love itself, love himself.
Yeah.
That Job sees in his suffering the power it can hold. That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
And then interestingly, God commends Job and gives him an attaboy for being honest and for saying what he really felt and not putting on airs and not saying nice things that God likes to hear. And then God chides the friends who technically were saying things that were theologically accurate, but were heartless, soulless, things that they were just uttering cliches. And so again, Job's authenticity, because Job was relentless in trying to get to the bottom of this question of suffering, he encounters God himself, God who is love, and that's ultimately the only thing that can answer this question. It's not a syllogism about free will, as much as that can help us to understand some things.
Yeah.
It's not a logical argument about, well, technically God works this or that way. For as much as logic can take us up to the precipice, it's only love that can take us all the way through the door.
Love is hard.
It is.
It's hard to understand.
Absolutely.
Like, with the problem with humans, like, is we lie. And so, like, you ever heard, like, the song Fake Love by Drake?
I'm sure I have.
Yeah, it's like, I can't trust a word you say. You only want to clip up after your mistakes, like, yada, yada.
Yeah.
You're showing fake love to me. And so, like, a lot of the times, I guess, people have experienced, like, fake love.
Yeah.
Or, like, a fake sense of security or comfort or anything. But God's never been like that. God always shows love. But he also shows tough love.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's what, like, the story of what Job is, right?
Absolutely. No, and again, I think that's that Dostoevsky quote that love in reality is harsh and dreadful compared to love in dreams.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of times we have sentimental ideas about what love looks like. And I think sometimes being a parent is one of the things that helps you to become a more complete person. I wouldn't say that everybody has to become a parent or you don't have a real life without being a parent. But again,
the
it
Catholics,
really...
the priests are marriage, right?
We believe that those are the two routes that God, more or less intends for people. And there are so many things that you find out about love and fail in love and make mistakes. And that by being a parent who might maybe, tip your waitresses and thank your parents, it might be the fact that your parents have made sacrifices. You have no idea what they've had to do. And they make mistakes too, but you see something about, hopefully at best, when our parents are getting it right, if we're getting it right, you see something about love that you might not have seen otherwise. And I really think that at the end of the day, the Christian faith, the teachings of the Bible, the hard, moral, nuanced, difficult issues, the contentious ones, the simple ones, that it really does just boil down back to the nature of love. And St. Augustine said it that way, that there really only is one commandment, and that's to love God and love your neighbor. All the other commandments are ways of getting specific, because if I love my wife, then cheating on her is completely off the table. And if I love God, then
you won't cheat on your wife.
Absolutely. And if I love God, then I'm not going to take his name in vain.
Right.
And I'm not going to miss an opportunity to honor him and to receive what he's giving me at Mass.
Yeah.
And if I love my friends, obviously murder's probably off the table. Okay, that's commandment number 5. Lying, that's not representative of love. Stealing, envy.
Yeah.
Those are all things that the 10 Commandments, it turns out, is just getting a bit more specific about what it means to love.
Yeah.
And
what about Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah, and Jesus really ups the ante there. And, like we would have talked about in class for guys who had me as freshmen, he takes all of those external commands and he makes them internal.
Which is hard.
It is. It's impossible. It's something you can't do it, and I can't do it. Only God can work that in us.
It's so, let's take adultery, for example. It's the most common one, especially for men, because men lust.
The whole constellation
but
of...
like, specifically lust, for example, like, a God says, like, if you look at a woman, and it made more sense in marriage to me, the scripture passage, but then he flipped it, like, if you look at a woman, like, whatever, like, that she's not a child of God, you've lusted in your heart.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, how does that make sense? Like, I was like, well, if I look at a model and I think she's beautiful, I don't think that's lusting. But then it's like, but I guess it made more sense to me in marriage. But I guess for, like, certain aspects of love, and I guess certain sins that we struggle with, like, how can we love God better so we don't sin? Like, lust is somewhat hard.
Yeah.
Because some people say that, like, lust is like somewhat love, and then, like, lust is, like, also just lust.
Yeah. No, and I think it's important, and we talk about this in class, when it comes up, that there's a world of difference between attraction and lust.
Yeah.
And again, I'd be worried about you if you saw the supermodel and you're like, I have no opinion. No comment.
Yeah.
Again, maybe it's kind of impertinent. The way we talk about it in class a lot of times is it's not the first look that has moral quality, it's the second look.
Okay.
And so if you walk by a supermodel convention and you obviously register, like, that's a bunch of beautiful supermodels.
Yeah.
Great. That means that you're alive. You can check your pulse and you're fine.
Yeah.
It's the second look where, as you're walking away, you kind of say, like, hey, dude, like, did you see that? That's when it starts to turn towards not just attraction, but objectifying.
Gotcha.
And reducing women to what entertainment they can provide for you and not who they are as persons. Because I'm guessing then, if you on your way, with your friend after walking past the supermodel convention, if you say it's a bunch of 10s in there, I'm guessing you're not talking about their appreciation for classical music is a 10 out of 10. I'm guessing you're rating them like you're shopping for something.
Let's go a little bit deeper though.
Yeah.
So, like, in anything, and you're married, but and I'm just speaking for myself, but like when I see a woman, like the only thing you can look at without even knowing her is attraction.
Yeah.
And so like I guess like not objectifying, like you said, that's the second look. But if you see someone that's beautiful, how can you approach them?
Yeah. I think confidently.
Yeah, confidently.
Yeah.
But like more deeper, like not like well, like the teachings of Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it'd be a denial of our humanity to say that you should just close your eyes and just listen for people's voices and just, kind of go off of, that we are more than just our minds, we're our bodies and our minds and our souls all together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that women know the difference in how you answer that question. And if you go up to them and you treat them as you're on a timetable to get what you want, how you want, when you want, and as opposed to, if you want to approach somebody beautiful and ask for a number, that what you care about is her, not just her looks, not just what she's wearing, but the entirety of her. And I think that usually only bears out over the course then of days or weeks where it becomes clear, are you just trying to get something here? Or are you actually approaching it not through the eyes of lust and she's a trophy, she's an object,
hard,
but it's love. It's I see who you are and I want to know more of who you are. And that's what I value. And that's a physical thing, and that's a spiritual thing, and that's a mental thing, and that's an emotional thing, and all together.
Nice.
And so yeah, like you said, I think when God's command becomes internal, and Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, "Be perfect as God Himself is perfect."
Yeah.
He's not describing something difficult. He's describing something that you just cannot do without God's grace. And that's why coming out of confession, it's not just if I really implement this advice, I'll be a nicer guy. It's if God's grace is doing this for me, then I can become someone and something that it's impossible to be by working real hard and white knuckling it.
All right. That's sick. I like that. That was a great example of that.
Well,
I think a lot of men here at CC will really appreciate that. And I just think people who watch it. So, let's get some more fun questions.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite Catholic saint?
My favorite Catholic saint? I think I have to go back to Saint Joan of Arc.
Okay.
There's no one in the history of the world, man or woman, who's ever been entrusted with the complete generalship of a nation's armies at the age of 17.
Wow.
Besides Joan of Arc. And so even if you're not Catholic, even if you don't believe in God, not unlike Mark Twain, who wrote one of the most iconic books about Joan of Arc, as though it's a memoir of her life, he described it as his finest work. And it wasn't Huckleberry Finn, it wasn't Life on the Mississippi. He said, the book that took me more than anything else to write, my great work was the book he wrote about Joan of Arc.
Wow. Because
she's an absolutely startling figure.
It's a she?
She, St. Joan of Arc,
Wow.
So she was born, I'm pretty sure, in the early 1400s during a time that France had basically been under English rule for close to 100 years. And this illiterate young girl in the city of Domremy, France, claimed that there appeared to her, I think it was St. Michael and maybe St. Margaret, that these saints began to appear to her, that God began to speak to her through these visions. And so she goes to the deposed king of France and she says, God has sent me here. He wants me to take control of the armies of France and he wants me to liberate our nation.
Wow.
And she leads those armies and breaks the siege of Orleans and fights this.
That's amazing.
This incredibly effective and efficient campaign. She herself is taken prisoner and eventually killed by the British, burned as a heretic, as a witch, and it's not for a few hundred years that she's vindicated and canonized as a saint. But there are probably few historical figures in the history of the world that have swayed the course of history the way Joan of Arc has.
Yeah.
And it all seemed to be because God called her to something.
Nice.
And she said, I've got no reason to be afraid. God has made me for this moment. And I think she's the patron saint of France.
Nice.
Because of the role that she played in her history.
That's sick. Okay, so how do you want to be remembered?
I think in my life, and I think as I know it's a cliche answer, and it's the first one that comes to mind, but maybe to put language to it, the guys here who graduate, the guys that I've had for class, my family, my children, just as someone who is absolutely unswervingly loyal.
Okay.
And that's a way of saying it, somebody who absolutely loves.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that, and something that I hope guys here experience and my family experiences, that's not just a responsive love. Like, oh yeah, if you call Mr. George, he'll help you out of a jam.
Yeah.
Or, if you stop by school, he'll say hi and he'll make you a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But I think,
I want a cup of coffee.
yeah, I'll make you one. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think if God really is love, and if love, when it's real, really resembles God, I think that means initiative.
Yeah.
That God comes looking for us. He's not just waiting for us to sort things out, but that God is he's pacing back and forth.
So
he's,
man of
he's
love.
searching for us. Man of love. And most of all, that means a man of initiative, that unlooked for.
Character.
Yeah, absolutely. That I was somebody who would go out of his way over and over and over to show that loyalty and to show that what's going on in your life is important to me.
Nice. Okay. So then the ultimate question, and probably our last question.
Yeah.
Why Jesus Christ?
I think there has to be a twofold answer. I think that objectively, there is no more beautiful story that's ever been told, that there's no more dramatic, heroic, inspiring story that you could tell if you wanted to say that God himself, who has no need of anyone or anything, entered into the limitations of humanity to show us how much he loves us. And then humanity's response was to off him, was to kill him. And that through all of that, God was able to draw the greatest good and love out of the greatest conceivable suffering.
Yeah, forgive.
There's no, so tell me a story that involves more humility than God becoming a human being. Tell me a story that involves more love than loving even when you're rejected. Tell me a story that involves more sacrifice than Jesus is. I think that literally there's no story that anyone could tell in any possible universe that's a more compelling or powerful narrative. And the second part of it is that we happen to believe it's true.
Yeah.
It's not just that it's a really beautiful story, and that's really, I don't think there's anything more beautiful you could build your life around. And the kicker is that we believe that it's actually the way things are.
Yeah.
It's not just a beautiful story, although it is that, but that it's also the reality that if you go looking for God, then you find that he's been looking for you.
Yeah.
And that this story actually describes what reality is like. That's a love you don't just have to read about. I read Harry Potter. I love it. Oh man, like it's a cool story. But as far as I know, there's no Hogwarts out there. I'm never going to go there. I had to make my peace with that. But
it's
an even more, it really is. And maybe we can make our next episode about that. But there's an even more beautiful story that happens to be the way things really are.
Yeah.
So why Jesus Christ? Because there's nothing more beautiful, and because it's all true.
Yeah. Mainly for me is the way Jesus lived.
Yeah.
So like healing of the sick, helping the poor, like people who were like banished or exiled, like just came to Jesus. And like really, when he was on not the night, but the supper, like I actually have to like the supper, then when he was given his bread and body, like that was super, super, super impactful. When I read that, there was nothing more clear than what God was giving. And then honestly, just the ways he taught and the parables, you actually have to like think about them. I like thinking.
Absolutely.
But then you can apply them to life.
Yeah.
And so, I see with a lot of other religions, it's not really like that. Now, yes, I think a lot of religions say like love your mother and father like they do. And like those are more tangible things. But Jesus more looks inward instead of outward, and he reflects the heart.
Yeah.
So that's one of my biggest reasons. And then, as I said before, I think the historical context is ultimately true. I think if a lot of people with the debate with Islam, and I don't mean to throw any shade at you guys, but they think their book is the ultimate authority, but then they think Jesus is a prophet. But then if you look at the Gospels came before that. And so it would make more sense that Jesus is God. And he says who he says he is.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. George, for coming on my
Thank you,
podcast.
Mitchell. Yeah, what a delight.
I'm sorry we didn't get to ask as many questions about you, though, but I knew you were deep with the faith. And honestly, I think in a world that's really secular and doesn't really have God, I think your voice will really stand out to many people.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Well, I sure appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Mitchell.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.